Welcome to Raven Reports. I'm your host, Evelyn Raven, and tonight we're exploring a disturbing tale of ambition, negligence, and the dark consequences that follow when fame becomes more important than family. The soft glow of ring lights illuminated Meredith Parker's face as she stared into the camera with practiced intensity. At 32, she had the polished look of someone who had spent years perfecting her online presence, contoured cheekbones, precisely lined lips, and eyes that seemed to sparkle on command. Her apartment, a sleek one-bedroom in downtown Chicago, had been transformed into what she called her studio. One wall painted a matte charcoal gray that served as her backdrop, professional lighting equipment arranged in a semicircle, and a desk covered with products waiting to be showcased to her audience. "And if you swipe up right now, my followers get an exclusive 40% discount," Meredith said, her voice carrying the rehearsed enthusiasm that had become second nature after 5 years of creating content. "Remember to use code MayorParker40 at checkout. This offer expires at midnight." As Meredith continued her live stream, a small sound monitor on her desk flickered with activity, the occasional whimper coming from the nursery down the hall. Each time the lights on the monitor jumped, Meredith's eyes would dart briefly toward it before refocusing on her audience with even greater intensity, as if compensating for the momentary distraction. 18 months earlier, Meredith's life had been dramatically different. Her social media following had been modest, around 20,000 followers spread across platforms, enough to secure occasional brand partnerships but not enough to provide a full-time income. She had been working as a marketing assistant at a cosmetics company, using her insider knowledge to build credibility for her beauty reviews online. Her boyfriend of 3 years, Jason, had been supportive of her ambitions, though he'd often gently suggested she might be putting too much pressure on herself. Then came the pregnancy, unplanned and initially unwelcome. Meredith had always imagined herself as a mother someday, but not while she was still trying to build her brand. Not when she was finally starting to gain traction. She'd spent the first trimester in a fog of anxiety, worried that everything she'd worked for would slip away. But then something unexpected happened. When Meredith reluctantly announced her pregnancy on social media, her engagement skyrocketed. Suddenly, she wasn't just another beauty influencer in an oversaturated market. She was relatable, authentic. Her content about navigating pregnancy while maintaining her beauty routines resonated with an audience she hadn't previously reached. Brands specializing in maternity and baby products began reaching out. By her third trimester, her following had tripled. The birth of Emma had further accelerated Meredith's rise. The perfectly curated photos of mother and child, the vulnerability she strategically displayed about the challenges of new motherhood, the real talk sessions about postpartum recovery, all of it translated into the kind of growth Meredith had been chasing for years. 8 months after Emma's birth, Jason had moved out. The arguments had become too frequent, too intense. He couldn't understand why Meredith needed to film Emma's first steps 3 times to get the right angle. He was disturbed by how Meredith would check engagement metrics while breastfeeding. The final straw came when he discovered Meredith had given Emma baby food she was allergic to, just a tiny amount, because a sponsored post for that brand was paying particularly well. The allergic reaction had been mild, but Jason's reaction had not. "You're using her," he had said, his voice breaking as he packed his clothes. "She's not a prop, Meredith. She's our daughter." Meredith had wept genuine tears after he left, and then filmed a raw emotional video about navigating single motherhood that became her most viewed content to date. Now, 10 months after Jason's departure, Meredith had finally secured what she considered her big break. After years of pitching herself to Luminous Beauty, the prestigious skincare brand had agreed to a partnership. Tonight's live stream was showcasing their newest line of products, with Meredith demonstrating their application while answering questions from viewers. If the campaign performed well, if she drove enough sales using her discount code, Luminous would consider a longer-term contract. It could mean financial security, increased visibility, and the validation Meredith had been seeking since she first started creating content. The stakes were high, and Meredith could feel it in the tightness of her shoulders as she spoke about the serum she was applying to her face. According to her analytics, she had more live viewers than ever before, over 3,000 people watching her every move. The comments were flooding in too quickly to read them all, but she could see the general sentiment was positive. People were clicking the link, using her code. This was working. Behind her practiced smile, Meredith calculated how much she stood to earn if even 20% of viewers made a purchase. The numbers were dizzying. This single live stream could generate more income than she'd made in the previous 3 months combined. The baby monitor lit up again, this time with a more insistent cry. Meredith glanced at it, her rhythm faltering for just a moment before she recovered. "Emma's just letting me know she's still awake," Meredith said with a laugh, seamlessly incorporating the interruption into her presentation. "She wants her own luminous beauty routine, I think. But this mama's got 15 more minutes to show you how to achieve this gorgeous glow." She continued applying the moisturizer, describing its texture and scent, with the precision of someone who had studied the product description thoroughly. The live stream was scheduled to run for 45 minutes, and she was 30 minutes in. Just 15 more minutes to seal the deal with Luminous. The cries from the monitor grew louder, then seemed to shift in tone. Meredith's eyes flicked toward it again, a faint furrow appearing between her brows. Emma's nap time had been disrupted, which wasn't unusual, but something about the sound seemed different. Still, Meredith pressed on. Babies cried, that's what they did. Emma was safe in her crib, and Meredith needed to finish this live stream. Now, what makes this moisturizer revolutionary is the peptide complex, she continued, her voice rising slightly to be heard over Emma's cries. It penetrates to the deepest layers of the epidermis to plump and hydrate from within. The cries from the monitor suddenly stopped, replaced by a strange, muffled sound. Meredith paused, her hand hovering over the product she was about to pick up. The sound coming through the monitor wasn't crying anymore. It was something else, something that made Meredith's stomach tighten with instinctive alarm. Then she remembered the audience. 3,000 people watching her, waiting for her to continue. Representatives from Luminous Beauty among them, evaluating her performance, the opportunity she had worked years to secure. "Sorry about that, everyone," Meredith said, forcing a smile. "Where was I? Oh yes, the peptide complex." The monitor was silent now. The silence should have been a relief. Emma must have settled back down, but instead it felt wrong, unsettling. Meredith found herself stumbling over words as she moved on to the next product, a vitamin C serum that was supposed to be the star of the line. A viewer commented, "Is your baby okay?" Meredith saw the comment scroll past among dozens of others asking about the products. She felt a flash of annoyance. She was trying to stay focused, and now this commenter was drawing attention away from the products. "Emma's fine," Meredith said brightly, "just fighting her nap time as usual. Now, this vitamin C serum is a game changer, especially if you struggle with hyperpigmentation." But the comment had triggered others. "That crying didn't sound normal. Maybe you should check on your baby. Is someone else watching her?" Meredith felt heat rising in her cheeks. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The comments about Emma were distracting from the products, from the purpose of the live stream. She needed to redirect. "I appreciate your concern, everyone, but Emma is perfectly fine," Meredith said, her tone growing firmer. "She's in her crib, safe and sound. Now, let's get back to talking about this amazing serum, which has completely transformed my skin texture in just 3 weeks." She held the serum bottle closer to the camera, determined to recapture the audience's attention. But the silence from the monitor was becoming increasingly distracting. Emma never settled down this quickly. Even on good days, she would babble or whimper before fully falling asleep. Meredith glanced at the timer on her screen. 10 more minutes of the scheduled live stream. 10 minutes to seal her future with Luminous Beauty. 10 minutes until she could check on Emma. The best way to apply this serum is with gentle patting motions, Meredith demonstrated, her movements becoming slightly mechanical as she divided her attention between her audience and the silent monitor. "You want to make sure it's fully absorbed before applying your moisturizer." More comments about Emma scrolled past. Meredith ignored them, focusing instead on the positive comments about the products, responding to questions about ingredients and application techniques. 8 minutes left. A text message notification appeared on Meredith's phone, which was propped up beside her as a backup for monitoring comments. It was from her neighbor, Diane. "Is everything okay with Emma?" Hearing strange sounds through the wall, Meredith's heart rate accelerated. Diane, a retired nurse who lived in the adjacent apartment, had never texted about Emma's crying before. She knew Meredith was a single mother and was generally understanding about normal baby noises. 6 minutes left on the live stream. Meredith's hands had begun to tremble slightly as she opened the final product, a night mask that was supposed to work wonders while you slept. The silent monitor seemed to grow larger in her peripheral vision, demanding her attention. "This mask is perfect for busy moms like me," Meredith said, her voice now containing a slight tremor that she couldn't fully control. You apply it before bed and wake up with the most incredible glowing skin. Another text from Diane. Meredith, I'm concerned. Please check on Emma. 5 minutes left. Meredith could feel sweat beading along her hairline, threatening to ruin the flawless makeup she'd spent an hour perfecting before the live stream. The comments were now predominantly about Emma, viewers urging her to check on the baby. The product questions had all but disappeared. I can see you're all very concerned about Emma, Meredith said, unable to ignore the comments any longer. I assure you she's fine. She's just napping. I'll check on her as soon as we're done here, which is in just a few minutes. 4 minutes. Meredith's phone rang. Diane calling now, not just texting. Meredith declined the call, her movements jerky with growing anxiety. She could feel the live stream slipping away from her, the carefully planned presentation derailing as viewers fixated on Emma's welfare rather than the products. As I was saying, Meredith continued, her voice now strained, this night mask has transformed my skincare routine. I used to wake up with dull, tired skin, but now, her doorbell rang, the sound piercing through the apartment. Meredith flinched, nearly dropping the product she was holding. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time, followed by knocking. Meredith, open up! Diane's voice called through the door. I'm worried about Emma. 3 minutes left on the scheduled live stream. The comments were now a flood of concern and criticism. Go check on your baby. What is wrong with you? I'm calling CPS if you don't check on that child right now. This is horrifying to watch. Meredith felt trapped in a nightmare, caught between the opportunity she had worked years to secure and the growing certainty that something was wrong with Emma. But she was so close to finishing. Just 3 more minutes to complete what could be the most important professional opportunity of her life. I need to wrap this up quickly, Meredith said, her voice now openly shaking. The night mask should be applied as the final step in your routine. Use my code MayorParker40 for 40% off the entire line. Thank you all for watching. She ended the live stream 2 minutes early, the product still in her hand as she jumped up from her chair. The knocking at her door had grown more insistent, but Meredith ignored it, rushing down the hallway to Emma's nursery. The room was dim, illuminated only by a small nightlight shaped like a moon. Meredith flipped on the overhead light and moved quickly to the crib where Emma lay unnaturally still. Her daughter's face was tinged with blue, her eyes wide and panicked. Beside her on the mattress was a small purple grape, one of the snacks Meredith had given her before putting her down for her nap, cut in half as recommended but still large enough to cause an obstruction. Emma, Meredith screamed, terror washing through her as she lifted her daughter's limp body. Emma, baby, breathe. Meredith's first aid training kicked in through her panic. She turned Emma face down over her forearm, supporting her head, and delivered 5 back blows between her shoulder blades. Nothing happened. Emma remained limp, her lips now a deeper shade of blue. The pounding on the apartment door continued, with Diane's voice growing more frantic. Meredith ignored it, focused entirely on Emma. She flipped her daughter over and performed a finger sweep of her mouth, feeling desperately for the grape, but couldn't locate it. Help, Meredith screamed, finally responding to Diane's knocking as she ran to the door with Emma in her arms. Help me, she's choking. Diane burst in as soon as the door opened, taking in the situation with the experienced eye of a former emergency room nurse. She immediately took Emma from Meredith's arms and performed the Heimlich maneuver modified for an infant. 5 back blows followed by 5 chest thrusts. On the 3rd round, a half grape shot from Emma's mouth and landed on the floor. Seconds later, Emma drew a ragged breath, followed by a wail that was the most beautiful sound Meredith had ever heard. Call 911, Diane instructed sharply, continuing to monitor Emma. She needs to be checked out. How long has she been like this? Meredith fumbled for her phone with trembling hands. I don't know. I was doing a live stream. I heard her crying, then she went quiet. Maybe 15 minutes ago? Diane's expression transformed from concern to horror. 15 minutes? You knew something was wrong 15 minutes ago and you didn't check on her? The accusation hit Meredith like a physical blow. I didn't know she was choking. I thought she was just crying and then fell asleep. But even as she said the words, Meredith knew they weren't entirely true. She had sensed something was wrong. The cries had been different. The sudden silence had been suspicious. Diane had texted, then called. And still, Meredith had continued her live stream, prioritizing her partnership with Luminous Beauty over her daughter's safety. The next hours passed in a blur of sirens, emergency room lights, and questions from medical professionals that Meredith struggled to answer truthfully. How long had Emma been choking? Why hadn't Meredith checked on her sooner? Who had ultimately dislodged the grape? Each question felt like an indictment. Emma was admitted for observation. The doctors concerned about possible hypoxic injury from the prolonged choking episode. As Meredith sat beside the hospital crib, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with each precious breath, her phone buzzed continuously with notifications. The live stream, cut short by the emergency, had exploded across social media, but not in the way Meredith had hoped. Someone had recorded the stream and shared clips of Meredith ignoring concerns about her baby, continuing to promote skincare products while viewers begged her to check on Emma. The video was going viral, accompanied by hashtags like Bonner, Bad Mother, and Choking for Views. Luminous Beauty had already issued a statement distancing themselves from Meredith and condemning her actions. Everything she had worked for was crumbling around her, but as Meredith watched Emma sleep in the hospital crib, she could barely bring herself to care about her collapsing career. The reality of what had almost happened, what she had almost allowed to happen through her neglect, was crushing her with the weight of guilt and shame. 2 days later, Emma was released from the hospital with no apparent permanent damage from the incident. But as Meredith brought her daughter home, she found 2 people waiting outside her apartment, a police officer and a representative from Child Protective Services. Ms. Parker, the CPS worker said, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes cold. "We need to discuss the events that occurred during your live stream on Tuesday evening. The investigation was thorough and humiliating. Meredith's entire online presence was scrutinized for evidence of previous neglect or endangerment. The viral video of the live stream was analyzed by experts who testified about the approximate time frame during which Meredith had likely known something was wrong with Emma, but continued streaming anyway. Diane provided a statement about her attempts to alert Meredith to Emma's distress. Medical professionals confirmed that Emma had suffered a prolonged choking episode that could have been fatal without intervention. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Meredith's attorney advised her to cooperate fully and show remorse. In a closed courtroom 6 weeks after the incident, Meredith pleaded guilty to child endangerment. "Ms. Parker," the judge said, looking down at her from the bench, "the court has reviewed the evidence in this case, including the video that clearly shows you prioritizing a commercial live stream over your child's safety. Your daughter could have died while you continued to promote beauty products, ignoring multiple warnings that something was wrong. This court cannot fathom the level of negligence and misplaced priorities demonstrated by your actions." Meredith stood with her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. She had no defense to offer. Everything the judge said was true. "However," the judge continued, "the court also recognizes that you have no prior history of child endangerment, and that you have cooperated fully with authorities and expressed genuine remorse for your actions. Taking these factors into consideration, I am sentencing you to 3 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, and 200 hours of community service. Additionally, you will be subject to regular home visits from Child Protective Services for the duration of your probation." The judge leaned forward, her expression severe. "Be very clear about this, Ms. Parker. This court is giving you an opportunity to prove that you can be a fit parent to your daughter. If there are any further incidents, if you violate the terms of your probation in any way, you will face imprisonment and likely lose custody of your child permanently. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meredith whispered. "I understand." As part of her plea agreement, Meredith was required to make a public statement acknowledging her actions and their consequences. Standing before cameras outside the courthouse, her once perfect appearance now haggard from weeks of stress and sleepless nights, Meredith faced the public scrutiny she had once craved for entirely different reasons. "What I did was inexcusable," she said, her voice trembling. "I put my ambition and my desire for success above my daughter's safety. I ignored warning signs that she was in danger because I was focused on completing a live stream. There is no justification for my actions, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends to Emma and working to become the mother she deserves." The statement went viral, just as the original live stream had, but the public reaction was mixed. Some viewers expressed sympathy for a single mother who had made a terrible mistake. Others condemned Meredith as irredeemably selfish, calling for Emma to be placed with her father or in foster care. Brand partnerships that had survived the initial scandal now dissolved completely. Meredith's social media accounts, once her primary source of income and validation, became unusable as they filled with hateful comments and threats. In the aftermath, Meredith moved out of her downtown apartment, unable to face Diane or the other neighbors who had heard Emma's distress that night. She found a modest 2-bedroom rental on the outskirts of the city, far from the trendy neighborhood that had featured so prominently in her content. Her parents, who had been largely absent from her online presence due to what Meredith had described as complicated family dynamics, but was actually their disapproval of her lifestyle choices, now stepped in to provide financial and emotional support. Jason, Emma's father, initially filed for full custody upon learning of the incident. The court proceedings were contentious, with Jason's attorney presenting the viral video and subsequent investigation as evidence that Meredith was an unfit mother. Meredith, represented by a public defender after her income had evaporated, feared she would lose Emma completely. In a surprising turn, it was Jason who ultimately proposed a compromise. After witnessing Meredith's genuine remorse and efforts to change, he suggested a co-parenting arrangement with gradually increasing visitation rights for Meredith, contingent on her continued compliance with court-ordered therapy and parenting classes. "I don't want to take Emma away from her mother," Jason told the family court judge. "I want Meredith to be the mother Emma deserves. I believe she can be that person, with the right support and supervision." The judge approved the arrangement, and Emma began splitting time between her parents' homes, with Jason having primary custody and Meredith having supervised visits that would become unsupervised if she demonstrated consistent, responsible parenting. 18 months after the live stream that had destroyed her influencer career, Meredith sat in a circle of folding chairs in the community center where she now worked part-time as an administrative assistant. Around her sat other parents who, like her, had made serious mistakes with their children and were working to rebuild trust and develop better parenting skills. "My name is Meredith," she said when it was her turn to speak, "and I almost lost my daughter, in every sense of the word, because I cared more about my online image than her safety." The group nodded in understanding, free of the judgment that Meredith still faced in much of her daily life. Here, in this room of parents working to overcome their failures, Meredith found a kind of acceptance she had never experienced as an influencer with thousands of followers. "The hardest part," Meredith continued, "is that I still catch myself sometimes thinking about how things look rather than how they are. Yesterday, Emma and I were at the park, and she wanted to jump in a mud puddle. My first thought wasn't about whether she would have fun or even if she would catch cold. It was about how messy she would look and whether people would judge me for letting her get dirty." She took a deep breath. "But then I remembered that night, how close I came to losing her forever because I was worried about how things looked. So I let her jump in the puddle. She got completely soaked and covered in mud, and she was so happy. And when a woman walking by gave me a disapproving look, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt proud that I was finally putting Emma first." After the meeting, Meredith picked Emma up from the center's childcare room. At 2.5, Emma was now a talkative toddler with Jason's dark curls and Meredith's expressive eyes. She ran to Meredith with the uninhibited joy that never failed to make Meredith's heart clench with a mixture of love and lingering guilt. "Mommy, I drawed you." Emma held up a page covered in colorful scribbles that vaguely suggested a human figure. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Meredith said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Is that me?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "You and me and Daddy and Grammy and Grampy." Meredith studied the drawing more carefully, now making out several stick figures of varying sizes. "You drew our whole family. I love it." As they walked home hand in hand, Meredith reflected on how thoroughly her understanding of success had changed. 2 years ago, success had meant followers, engagement, brand deals, external validation from strangers. Now, success was measured in moments: Emma's laughter, a peaceful bedtime, a day without anxiety, the gradual rebuilding of trust with Jason and her parents. When they reached their small apartment, Meredith helped Emma wash her hands before their snack, a routine that now included a careful inspection of all food for choking hazards, a habit Meredith would likely maintain long after it was developmentally necessary. As she cut apple slices into tiny, safe pieces, her phone buzzed with a notification. Out of long ingrained habit, Meredith reached for it immediately, then paused. Emma was chattering about her day at the childcare center, a story involving a tower of blocks and a friend named Zoe. 2 years ago, Meredith would have been half listening while scrolling through her phone, maybe taking a strategic photo of their quality time for her Instagram stories. Meredith left the phone on the counter and gave Emma her full attention. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, Meredith finally checked her phone. The notification was from her probation officer, confirming their meeting the following week. Meredith responded promptly, then found herself scrolling through her camera roll. Photographs of Emma filled the screen. Emma at the park, Emma painting, Emma napping with her favorite stuffed rabbit. Unlike the carefully posed and filtered images that had once populated Meredith's social media accounts, these photos were candid, sometimes blurry, capturing genuine moments rather than manufactured perfection. Near the bottom of her camera roll was a folder Meredith rarely opened. It contained screenshots of the comments from that fateful live stream, the ones warning her about Emma, begging her to check on her baby. Meredith had saved them as a reminder, a digital hair shirt she could don whenever she felt herself slipping back into old patterns of thinking. She opened the folder now, reading through the increasingly frantic messages from viewers who had recognized the danger before she had. Or rather, before she had allowed herself to acknowledge it. Is your baby okay? That crying didn't sound normal. Please check on your baby. What is wrong with you? Meredith closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly, but her resolve strengthened. The path to redemption was long and uncertain. Some days the weight of what she had almost done, what she had actually done, threatened to crush her. But for Emma's sake, and for her own, Meredith would continue walking that path one day at a time. The following morning, as Meredith prepared breakfast for Emma, her phone rang with Jason's number. Her co-parenting relationship with Jason had improved gradually over the past year, evolving from tense exchanges during handoffs to occasional family dinners where they could both enjoy Emma's company without conflict. "Morning, Jason," Meredith answered, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder as she poured milk into Emma's cereal bowl. "Hey, Mir." Jason's voice was hesitant, using the nickname he hadn't used since before their breakup. "I've got some news I wanted to discuss with you before I mentioned it to Emma." Meredith tensed, her mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Was Jason moving away? Getting married? Seeking full custody again? "I've been offered a promotion," Jason continued. "It would mean more money, better hours, but I'd need to be in the office 3 days a week instead of working remotely." "That's great, Jason," Meredith said cautiously, not yet understanding why this required a special conversation. "The thing is," Jason said, "with the current custody arrangement, I have Emma on the days I've been working from home. If I take this promotion, I'd need childcare those days, and it seems wasteful to pay for childcare when you're available and, well, you've been doing really well with everything." Meredith froze, hardly daring to hope she understood what Jason was suggesting. "Are you saying you want to adjust the custody schedule? Give me more time with Emma?" "Yes," Jason said. "If you're open to it, you'd have her those 3 weekdays and I'd take her for the long weekend. It would actually be closer to 50-50 than what we have now." Tears sprang to Meredith's eyes. After 18 months of supervised visits gradually transitioning to overnight stays, Jason was suggesting a nearly equal co-parenting arrangement, a vote of confidence that meant more to Meredith than any brand deal or viral video ever had. "I would love that," Meredith said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me, Jason." "You've earned it," Jason said simply. "You're not the same person you were that night. I see how hard you've worked, how much you've changed. Emma deserves to have both her parents fully in her life." After they hung up, Meredith sat down across from Emma, who was happily making a mess of her cereal, oblivious to the significant conversation that had just taken place. Watching her daughter eat, Meredith felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for this second chance, lingering shame for her past actions, and a quiet determination to continue proving herself worthy of the trust being placed in her. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Emma asked, noticing the tears that had spilled onto Meredith's cheeks. "Because I'm happy," Meredith said, reaching across the table to wipe a smear of milk from Emma's chin. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're very, very happy." Emma considered this information with the serious expression she adopted when processing new concepts. "I'm happy too," she finally declared. "Can we go to the park with the big slide today?" "Yes," Meredith said, smiling through her tears. "We can definitely go to the park with the big slide." As they cleared the breakfast dishes together, Emma helping in the way of toddlers, which created more work than it saved, Meredith's phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was a name she recognized: Catherine Lynn, the producer of a documentary series about social media and its impact on families. Catherine had contacted Meredith 6 months earlier, asking if she would be willing to be interviewed about her experience. Meredith had initially declined, still too raw and ashamed to discuss the incident publicly. Catherine had been understanding, but had left the door open for Meredith to reconsider. Curious, Meredith opened the email. "Dear Meredith," it read, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out again about the documentary series we discussed previously. We're now in the final stages of production, and I believe your story would add an important perspective to the conversation about the pressures of maintaining an online presence while parenting. If you're willing to reconsider being interviewed, I'd be grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. Your insight could help other parents avoid similar situations and contribute to a more nuanced understanding of the challenges and pitfalls of life as a content creator." Meredith read the email twice, considering her response. Her initial instinct was still to decline, to keep her head down, focus on rebuilding her life privately, and avoid any public attention that might reignite the controversy. But something about Catherine's approach gave her pause. The producer wasn't interested in sensationalizing what had happened. She seemed genuinely focused on the broader social context and potential educational value of Meredith's experience. After helping Emma get dressed for the day, Meredith composed a careful reply to Catherine, neither committing to nor rejecting the idea of participating in the documentary. She suggested a phone call to discuss the project in more detail before making a decision. As she and Emma walked to the park, Meredith reflected on how fundamentally her relationship with public attention had changed. Once she had craved the spotlight, measuring her worth by likes, comments, and follower counts. Now she was cautious about stepping back into public view, concerned not about her image, but about whether doing so would truly serve a purpose beyond herself. At the park, Meredith sat on a bench watching Emma navigate the playground with growing confidence. Her phone remained in her pocket. Unlike the other parents who were capturing every moment of their children's play for social media, Meredith had deleted all her social accounts months ago, part of her court-mandated separation from the influencer lifestyle, but also a personal choice to live more presently. "Mommy, watch me!" Emma called from the top of the slide, her face alight with excitement. "I'm watching, sweetheart," Meredith called back, making sure Emma could see that she had her full attention. "Go ahead." As Emma slid down with a squeal of delight, Meredith felt a now familiar tightness in her chest, the physiological reminder of how close she had come to losing this. The therapist she still saw weekly had helped her recognize these moments not as punishment, but as opportunities for gratitude, chances to appreciate what she still had, despite her mistakes. "Again, Mommy. Watch me again." Emma was already climbing back up the ladder to the slide. "I'm watching," Meredith assured her. "I see you, Emma. I'm right here." And she was, fully present, eyes unwaveringly on her daughter, the live stream and its aftermath a painful but necessary chapter in her ongoing journey toward becoming the mother Emma deserved. That evening, after tucking Emma into bed with 3 stories and a lullaby, their nightly ritual, Meredith had her scheduled call with Catherine Lynn about the documentary. As they discussed the project, Meredith was impressed by Catherine's thoughtfulness and commitment to examining the complex pressures faced by parents in the digital age. "We're not interested in creating another cautionary tale about bad mothers," Catherine explained. "What we want to explore is the system that places so many contradictory demands on parents, especially mothers, to be constantly visible and seemingly perfect online, while also being fully present and attentive to their children's needs." Meredith considered her words carefully before responding. "I made choices that endangered my daughter," she said finally. "That responsibility is mine alone. But I understand what you're saying about the larger context. The pursuit of validation through social media warped my priorities in ways I couldn't recognize until it was almost too late." After an hour of conversation, Meredith agreed to a preliminary interview with the understanding that she would have final approval over how her story was presented in the documentary. It was a small step back into public view, but one taken with caution and purpose rather than the desperate hunger for attention that had driven her previous online presence. As the months passed, Meredith continued rebuilding her life around what mattered most. The co-parenting arrangement with Jason evolved into a genuine partnership, with both parents supporting each other for Emma's benefit. Meredith's relationship with her own parents healed gradually as they witnessed her transformation from the status-obsessed influencer they had worried about to a mother who prioritized her child's well-being above all else. The documentary, titled Filtered, The Hidden Costs of Social Media Parenting, was released 2 years and 4 months after the infamous live stream. Meredith's segment was presented not as sensationalized true crime, but as a thoughtful examination of how the pressure to maintain a perfect online image had contributed to a near tragedy. The response was largely sympathetic, with many viewers, especially other parents, acknowledging that they had experienced similar, if less extreme, conflicts between their online personas and their parenting responsibilities. 3 years to the day after the incident, Meredith sat in her therapist's office for what they had agreed would be their final regular session. At 35, Meredith looked different than she had as an influencer. Her makeup was minimal, her clothing chosen for comfort rather than photogenic appeal, her hair its natural brown instead of the highlighted blonde she had maintained for her online brand. "How are you feeling about this milestone?" her therapist, Dr. Rivera, asked. Meredith considered the question seriously. "Mixed," she admitted. "Proud of how far I've come, but also aware that this will always be part of my story, and Emma's. I worry about when she's old enough to understand what happened, to maybe find that video online." Dr. Rivera nodded. "That's a valid concern, but remember what we've discussed about honesty being the foundation of rebuilding trust. When Emma is old enough, you'll find the right way to talk to her about it." "I've been thinking about what I'll say," Meredith said. "Not the details, she's too young for that, but the lesson, that everyone makes mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but what matters is what you do afterward, how you take responsibility and change." "That sounds like a valuable lesson," Dr. Rivera said, "one many adults never learn." As Meredith left the therapist's office for the last time as a regular client, she felt a sense of completion that had been building gradually over the past 3 years. The path from who she had been to who she was now had been painful, humbling, and at times seemingly impossible to navigate. But she had walked it step by step, day by day, choice by choice. In the parking lot, Meredith checked her watch, noting that she had just enough time to pick Emma up from preschool before meeting Jason for their monthly co-parenting check-in. As she started her car, a practical sedan that had replaced the flashy convertible she had featured prominently in her content, Meredith caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was neither the perfectly curated beauty influencer nor the disgraced mother from the viral video and subsequent news coverage. She was simply Meredith, Emma's mother, doing her best to be worthy of that title every day. As she drove toward Emma's preschool, Meredith reflected on the strange, painful journey that had brought her here. In the pursuit of external validation, she had nearly lost everything that truly mattered. Only by losing the life she had so desperately wanted had she found the one she actually needed. "Mommy," Emma called, running across the preschool playground when she spotted Meredith at the gate. "I made something for you." Meredith crouched down, opening her arms to receive both her daughter and the slightly crumpled paper Emma was clutching. "What did you make, sweetheart?" "It's us," Emma said proudly, holding up a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands. "See? I even drawed your smile." Meredith studied the drawing, noting the disproportionately large smile Emma had indeed given the taller figure. "It's perfect," she said, hugging her daughter close. "Absolutely perfect." And in that moment, present, connected, grateful. It truly was. Our world has become increasingly focused on the pursuit of attention, validation, and the carefully curated image we present online. For Meredith Parker, that pursuit nearly cost her everything that truly mattered. Her story serves as a reminder of how easily our priorities can become distorted in a culture that rewards the appearance of perfection over messy, authentic reality. The greatest horror in this tale isn't in graphic depictions of what might have happened to Emma, but in the recognition of how ordinary Meredith's mindset was. How many of us might see fragments of our own behavior in her desperate need for external validation, in the small moments when we prioritize our online presence over genuine connection with those around us. This has been Raven Reports. Remember, the most terrifying stories aren't about monsters that hide in the darkness. They're about the darkness that can hide within ordinary people, within decisions that seem small until they cascade into consequences too severe to imagine. Sleep well, and keep your priorities clear. Unlike Meredith, we may not get a second chance to choose what truly matters.